brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Howard Hughes. Howard Robert Hughes, Jr. was an American businessman, investor, pilot, film director, and philanthropist, known during his lifetime as one of the most financially successful individuals in the world. He first made a name for himself as a film producer, and then became an influential figure in the aviation industry. Later in life, he became known for his eccentric behavior and reclusive lifestyle, oddities that were caused in part by a worsening obsessive-compulsive disorder and chronic pain from a plane crash. As a maverick film tycoon, Hughes gained prominence in Hollywood beginning in the late 1920s, when he produced big-budget and often controversial films like The Racket, Hell's Angels, and Scarface. Later he controlled the RKO film studio. Hughes formed the Hughes Aircraft Company in 1932, hiring numerous engineers and designers. He spent the rest of the 1930s setting multiple world airspeed records and building the Hughes H-1 Racer and H-4 Hercules. He acquired and expanded Trans-World Airlines, and later acquired Air West, renaming it Hughes Air West. Hughes was included in Flying Magazine's list of the 51 heroes of aviation, ranked at 25. Today, his legacy is maintained through the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Early years. The birthplace of Howard Hughes is recorded as either Humble or Houston, Texas. The date remains uncertain due to conflicting dates from various sources. He repeatedly claimed that his birthday was on Christmas Eve. A 1941 affidavit birth certificate of Hughes that was signed by his aunt Annette Garneau Lummis and Estelle Borton Sharp states that he was born on December 24, 1905, in Harris County, Texas. However, his certificate of baptism recorded on October 7, 1906, in the Parish Register of St. John's Episcopal Church in Keokuk, Iowa, listed his birth as September 24, 1905 without any reference to the place of birth. Hughes was the son of Eileen Stone Garneau and Howard R. Hughes Sr., a successful inventor and businessman from Missouri. He was of English and some French Huguenot ancestry, and was a descendant of John Garneau, a minister who allegedly baptized George Washington. His father had patented the two-cone roller bit, which allowed rotary drilling for petroleum in previously inaccessible places. The senior Hughes made the shrewd and lucrative decision to commercialize the invention by leasing the bits instead of selling them, and founded the Hughes Tool Company in 1909. Hughes' uncle was the famed novelist, screenwriter, and film director Rupert Hughes. At a young age, Hughes demonstrated interest in science and technology. In particular, he had great engineering aptitude, and built Houston's first wireless radio transmitter at age 11. He went on to be one of the first licensed ham radio operators in Houston, having the assigned call sign W5CY. At 12, Hughes was photographed in the local newspaper, identified as being the first boy in Houston to have a motorized bicycle, which he had built from parts from his father's steam engine. He was an indifferent student, with a liking for mathematics, flying, and mechanics. He took his first flying lesson at 14, and later attended math and aeronautical engineering courses at Caltech. The Red Brick House, where Hughes lived as a teenager at 3921 Yoakum Street, Houston, today serves as the headquarters of the theology department of the University of St. Thomas. His mother Eileen died in March 1922 from complications of an ectopic pregnancy. Howard Hughes Sr. died of a heart attack in 1924. Their deaths apparently inspired Hughes to include the creation of a medical research laboratory in the will that he signed in 1925. At age 19, Howard Sr.'s will had not been updated since Aline's death, and Hughes inherited 75% of the family fortune. On his 19th birthday, Hughes was declared an emancipated minor, enabling him to take full control of his life. From a young age, Hughes was an excellent and enthusiastic golfer. He often scored near par figures and played the game to a 3 handicap during his 20s. He played frequently with top players, including Gene Sarazen. Hughes rarely played competitively, and gradually gave up his passion for the sport to pursue other interests. Hughes withdrew from Rice University shortly after his father's death. On June 1, 1925, he married Ella Botts Rice, daughter of David Rice and Martha Lawson Botts of Houston. They moved to Los Angeles, where he hoped to make a name for himself as a filmmaker. Entertainment. Hughes entered the entertainment industry after dropping out of Rice University and moving to Los Angeles. His first 2 films, Everybody's Acting and 2 Arabian Nights, were financial successes, the latter winning the first Academy Award for Best Director of a Comedy Picture. The Racket and The Front Page were also nominated for Academy Awards. Hughes spent $3.8 million to make the flying film Hell's Angels. It earned nearly $8 million, about double the production and advertising costs. Hell's Angels received 1 Academy Award nomination for Best Cinematography. He produced another hit, Scarface, a production delayed by censors' concern over its violence. The Outlaw was completed in 1941 and featured Jane Russell. It also received considerable attention from industry censors, this time owing to Russell's revealing costumes. Hughes designed a special bra for his leading lady, although Russell said it was uncomfortable and decided against wearing it. Ventures with David Charnay. Hughes began his business partnerships with industrialist and producer David Charnay through the film The Conqueror. Hughes and Charnay had led a buyout group that had acquired Air West. Hughes, Charnay, as well as 3 others were indicted under charges that were later dismissed. The charges were then settled in an indictment which had failed to allege illegal action on the part of Hughes, Charnay, and the other 3 that were also cleared of the false charges. The federal judge that had made the decision to dismiss the false charges had called the indictment one of the worst claims that he has ever seen. The indictment alleged that the group had conspired to drive down the stock price of Air West, and then pressured directors to sell to Hughes. The aftermath of the Air West deal was later settled with the SEC by paying former stockholders for alleged losses due to the former stockholders' impacts from the sale of their Air West stock. RKO. During the 1940s to the late 1950s, the Hughes Tool Company ventured into the film industry when it obtained partial ownership of the RKO companies, which included RKO Pictures, RKO Studios, a chain of movie theaters known as RKO Theaters, and a network of radio stations known as the RKO Radio Network. In 1948, Hughes gained control of RKO, a struggling major Hollywood studio, by acquiring 25% of the outstanding stock from Floyd Odlum's Atlas Corporation. Within weeks of acquiring the studio, Hughes dismissed 3/4 of the workforce, and production was shut down for 6 months, during which time investigations were conducted of each employee who remained with RKO as far as their political leanings were concerned. Only after ensuring that the stars under contract to RKO had no suspect affiliations with Hughes-approved completed pictures to be sent back for reshooting. This was especially true of the women who were under contract to RKO at the time. If Hughes felt that his stars did not properly represent the political views of his liking, or if a film's anti-communist politics were not sufficiently clear, he pulled the plug. In 1952, an abortive sale to a Chicago-based group connected to the mafia, with no experience in the industry, also disrupted studio operations at RKO even further. In 1953, Hughes was involved with a high-profile lawsuit as part of the settlement of the United States v. Paramount Pictures, Inc. antitrust case. As a result of the hearings, the shaky status of RKO became increasingly apparent. A steady stream of lawsuits from RKO's minority shareholders had grown to be extremely annoying to Hughes. They had accused him with financial misconduct and corporate mismanagement. Since Hughes wanted to focus primarily on his aircraft manufacturing and TWA holdings during the Korean War years, Hughes offered to buy out all other stockholders in order to dispense with their distractions. He had gained near total control of RKO by the end of 1954 at a cost of nearly $24 million, becoming the closest thing to a sole owner of a Hollywood studio seen in 3 decades. 6 months later, Hughes sold the studio to the General Tire and Rubber Company for $25 million. Hughes retained the rights to pictures that he had personally produced, including those made at RKO. He also retained Jane Russell's contract for Howard Hughes. This was the virtual end of his 25-year involvement in the motion picture industry. However, his reputation as a financial wizard emerged unscathed. During that time period, RKO became known as the home of film noir classic productions, thanks in part to the limited budgets required to make such films during Hughes' tenure. Hughes reportedly walked away from RKO having made $6.5 million in personal profit. General Tire was interested mainly in exploiting the value of the RKO library for television programming, even though it made some attempts to continue producing films. After a year and a half of mixed success, General Tire shut down film production entirely at RKO. At the end of January 1957, the studio lots in Hollywood and Culver City were sold to Dissolute Productions later that year for $6.15 million. Real estate. Beyond extending his business prowess in the manufacturing, aviation, entertainment, and hospitality industries, Hughes was a successful real estate investor. Hughes was deeply involved in the American real estate industry, where he amassed vast holdings of undeveloped land both in Las Vegas and in the deserts surrounding the city that had gone unused during his lifetime. In 1968, the Hughes Tool Company purchased the North Las Vegas Air Terminal. Originally known as Summa Corporation, the Howard Hughes Corporation was formed in 1972, when the oil tools business of Hughes Tool Company, then owned by Howard Hughes Jr., was floated on the New York Stock Exchange under the Hughes Tool name. This forced the remaining businesses of the original Hughes Tool to adopt a new corporate name, Summa. The name, Summa, Latin for highest, was adopted without the approval of Hughes himself, who preferred to keep his own name on the business, and suggested HRH Properties. Initially staying in the Desert Inn, Hughes refused to vacate his room, and instead decided to purchase the entire hotel. Hughes extended his financial empire to include Las Vegas real estate, hotels, and media outlets, spending an estimated $300 million, and using his considerable powers to take over many of the well-known hotels. especially the organized crime-connected venues. He quickly became one of the most powerful men in Las Vegas. He was instrumental in changing the image of Las Vegas from its Wild West roots into a more refined cosmopolitan city. Technology. Another portion of Hughes' business interests lay in aviation, airlines, and the aerospace and defense industries. Hughes was a lifelong aircraft enthusiast and pilot. He survived 4 airplane accidents, one while filming Hell's Angels, one while setting the airspeed record in the Hughes Racer, one at Lake Mead in 1943, and the near-fatal crash of the Hughes XF-11 in 1946. At Rogers Airport in Los Angeles, he learned to fly from pioneer aviators, including Moy Stevens. He set many world records and commissioned the construction of custom aircraft for himself while heading Hughes Aircraft at the airport in Glendale, CA. Operating from there, the most technologically important aircraft he commissioned was the Hughes H-1 Racer. On September 13, 1935, Hughes, flying the H-1, set the landplane airspeed record of over his test course near Santa Ana, California. This was the last time in history that the world airspeed record was set in an aircraft built by a private individual. A year and a half later, on January 19, 1937, flying the same H-1 Racer fitted with longer wings, Hughes set a new transcontinental airspeed record by flying non-stop from Los Angeles to Newark in 7 hours, 28 minutes, and 25 seconds. His average ground speed over the flight was. The H-1 Racer featured a number of design innovations. It had retractable landing gear, and all rivets and joints set flush into the body of the aircraft to reduce drag. The H-1 Racer is thought to have influenced the design of a number of World War II fighters such as the Mitsubishi A6M, Focke-Wulf FW-190, and F-8F Bearcat, although that has never been reliably confirmed. The H-1 Racer was donated to the Smithsonian in 1975 and is on display at the National Air and Space Museum. Round-the-world flight. On July 14, 1938, Hughes set another record by completing a flight around the world in just 91 hours, beating the previous record set in 1933 by Wiley Post in a single-engine Lockheed Vega by almost 4 days. Hughes returned home ahead of photographs of his flight taking off from New York City. Hughes continued to Paris, Moscow, Omsk, Yakutsk, Fairbanks, Minneapolis, then returning to New York City. For this flight he flew a Lockheed 14 Super electrofitted with the latest radio and navigational equipment. Hughes wanted the flight to be triumph of American aviation technology, illustrating that safe, long-distance air travel was possible. Albert Lodwick of Mystic, Iowa provided organizational skills as the flight operations manager. While he had previously been relatively obscure despite his wealth, being better known for dating Katharine Hepburn, New York City now gave Hughes a ticker-tape parade in the Canyon of Heroes. In 1938, the William P. Hobby Airport in Houston, Texas, known at the time as Houston Municipal Airport, was renamed after Hughes. But the name was changed back after people objected to naming the airport after a living person. Hughes also had a role in the design and financing of both the Boeing 307 Stratoliner and Lockheed L-049 Constellation. He received many awards as an aviator, including the Harmon Trophy in 1936 and 1938, the Collier Trophy, and the Bebesco Cup of the Federazione Aeronautica Internazionale in 1938, the Octave Chanute Award in 1940, and a special Congressional Gold Medal in 1939, in recognition of the achievements of Howard Hughes in advancing the science of aviation and thus bringing great credit to his country throughout the world. According to his obituary in the New York Times, Hughes never bothered to come to Washington to pick up the Congressional Gold Medal, which was eventually mailed to him. Hughes D-2 and XF-11. The Hughes D-2 was conceived in 1939 as a bomber with 5 crew members, powered by 42-cylinder Wright R2160 Tornado engines. In the end it appeared as two-seat fighter reconnaissance aircraft designated the D-2A, powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney R2849 engines. The aircraft was constructed using the Duramold process. The prototype was brought to Harpers Dry Lake, California in great secrecy in 1943 and first flew on June 20 of that year, acting on a recommendation of the President's son, Colonel Elliott Roosevelt, who had become friends with Hughes. In September 1943, the USAAF ordered 100 of a reconnaissance development of the D-2, known as the F-11. Hughes then attempted to get the military to pay for the development of the D-2. In November 1944, the hangar containing the D-2A was reportedly hit by lightning and the aircraft was destroyed. The D-2 design was abandoned, but led to the extremely controversial Hughes XF-11. The XF-11 was a large all-metal, two-seat reconnaissance aircraft powered by 2 Pratt & Whitney R4360-31 engines, each driving a set of contra-rotating propellers. Only the 2 prototypes were completed, the second one with a single propeller per side. Near-fatal crash of the Sikorsky S-43. In the spring of 1943, Hughes spent nearly a month in Las Vegas, test flying his Sikorsky S-43 amphibian aircraft, practicing touch-and-go landings on Lake Mead in preparation for flying the H-4 Hercules. The weather conditions at the lake during the day were ideal and he enjoyed Las Vegas at night. On May 17, 1943, Hughes flew the Sikorsky from California carrying 2 CAA aviation inspectors, 2 of his employees, and actress Ava Gardner. Hughes dropped Gardner off in Las Vegas and proceeded to Lake Mead to conduct qualifying tests in the S-43. The test flight did not go well. The Sikorsky crashed into Lake Mead, killing CAA Inspector Secco Klein and Hughes employee Richard Felt. Hughes suffered a severe gash on the top of his head when he hit the upper control panel and had to be rescued by one of the others on board. Hughes paid divers $100,000 to raise the aircraft, and later spent more than $500,000 restoring it. Near-fatal crash of the XF-11. Hughes was involved in a near-fatal aircraft accident on July 7, 1946. While performing the first flight of the prototype U.S. Army Air Force's reconnaissance aircraft, the XF-11, near Hughes Airfield at Culver City, California, an oil leak caused one of the contra-rotating propellers to reverse pitch, causing the aircraft to yaw sharply and lose altitude rapidly. Hughes attempted to save the aircraft by landing it at the Los Angeles Country Club golf course, but just seconds before reaching the course, the XF-11 started to drop dramatically and crashed in the Beverly Hills neighborhood surrounding the country club. When the XF-11 finally came to a halt after destroying 3 houses, the fuel tanks exploded, setting fire to the aircraft and a nearby home at 808 North Whittier Drive, owned by Lt. Col. Charles E. Meyer. Hughes managed to pull himself out of the flaming wreckage but lay beside the aircraft until he was rescued by Marine Master Sergeant William L. Durkin, who happened to be in the area visiting friends. Hughes sustained significant injuries in the crash, including a crushed collarbone, multiple cracked ribs, crushed chest with collapsed left lung, shifting his heart to the right side of the chest cavity, and numerous third-degree burns. An oft-told story said that Hughes sent a check to the Marine Weekly for the remainder of his life as a sign of gratitude. However, Durkin's daughter denied that he took any money for the rescue. Despite his physical injuries, Hughes was proud that his mind was still working. As he lay in his hospital bed, he decided that he did not like the bed's design. He called in plant engineers to design a customized bed, equipped with hot and cold running water, built in 6 sections, and operated by 30 electric motors, with push-button adjustments. The hospital bed was designed by Hughes specifically to alleviate the pain caused by moving with severe burn injuries. Despite the fact that he never had the chance to use the bed that he designed, Hughes' bed served as a prototype for the modern hospital bed. Hughes' doctors considered his recovery almost miraculous. Hughes, however, believed that neither miracle nor modern medicine contributed to his recovery, instead asserting the natural life-giving properties of fresh squeezed orange juice were responsible. Many attribute his long-term dependence on opiates to his use of codeine as a painkiller during his convalescence. The trademark moustache he wore afterward was used to hide a scar on his upper lip resulting from the accident. H-4 Hercules. The War Production Board originally contracted with Henry Kaiser and Hughes to produce the gigantic HK-1 Hercules flying boat for use during World War II to transport troops and equipment across the Atlantic as an alternative to seagoing troop transport ships that were vulnerable to German U-boats. The project was opposed by the military services, thinking it would siphon resources from higher priority programs, but was advocated by Hughes' powerful allies in Washington, D.C. After disputes, Kaiser withdrew from the project and Hughes elected to continue it as the H-4 Hercules. However, the aircraft was not completed until after the end of World War II. The Hercules was the world's largest flying boat, the largest aircraft made from wood, and, had the longest wingspan of any aircraft. The Hercules flew only once for 1 mile, and above the water, with Hughes at the controls, on November 2, 1947. The Hercules was nicknamed the Spruce Goose by its critics, but it was actually made largely from birch, not spruce, rather than of aluminum, because the contract required that Hughes build the aircraft of non-strategic materials. It was built in Hughes' Westchester, California, facility. In 1947, Howard Hughes was summoned to testify before the Senate War Investigating Committee to explain why the H-4 development had been so troubled, and why $22 million had produced only 2 prototypes of the F-11. General Elliott Roosevelt and numerous other USAAF officers were also called to testify in hearings that transfixed the nation during August and November 1947. In hotly disputed testimony over TWA's route awards and malfeasance in the defense acquisition process, Hughes turned the tables on his main interlocutor, Maine Senator Owen Brewster, and the hearings were widely interpreted as a Hughes victory. After being displayed at the harbor of Long Beach, California, the Hercules was moved to McMinnville, Oregon, where it is now part of the Evergreen Aviation Museum. Hughes Aircraft. Hughes Aircraft Company, a division of Hughes Tool Company, was founded by Hughes in 1932. in a rented corner of a Lockheed Aircraft Corporation hangar in Burbank, California, to build the H-1 Racer. During and after World War II, Hughes fashioned his company into a major defense contractor. The Hughes Helicopters division started in 1947, when helicopter manufacturer Kellett sold the latest design to Hughes for production. The company was a major American aerospace and defense contractor manufacturing numerous technology-related products that include spacecraft, vehicles, military aircraft, radar systems, electro-optical systems, the first working laser, aircraft computer systems, missile systems, ion propulsion engines, commercial satellites, and other electronics systems. In 1948, Hughes created a new division of the company, the Hughes Aerospace Group. The Hughes Space and Communications Group and the Hughes Space Systems Division were later spun off in 1948 to form their own divisions and ultimately became the Hughes Space and Communications Company in 1961. In 1953, Howard Hughes gave all his stock in the Hughes Aircraft Company to the newly formed Howard Hughes Medical Institute, thereby turning the aerospace and defense contractor into a tax-exempt charitable organization. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute sold Hughes Aircraft in 1985 to General Motors for $5.2 billion. In 1997, General Motors sold Hughes Aircraft to Raytheon, and in 2000, sold Hughes Space and Communications to Boeing. A combination of Boeing, GM, and Raytheon acquired the Hughes Research Laboratories, where it focused on advanced developments in microelectronics, information and systems sciences, materials, sensors, and photonics. Their workspace spans from basic research to product delivery. It has particularly emphasized capabilities in high-performance integrated circuits, high-power lasers, antennas, networking, and smart materials. Airlines. In 1939, at the urging of Jack Fry, president of Transworld Airlines, Hughes quietly purchased a majority share of TWA stock for nearly $7 million and took control of the airline. Upon assuming ownership, Hughes was prohibited by federal law from building his own aircraft, seeking an aircraft that would perform better than his fleet of Boeing 307 Stratoliners. Hughes and Fry approached Boeing's competitor, Lockheed. Hughes had a good relationship with Lockheed, since they had built the aircraft he used in his record flight around the world in 1938. Lockheed agreed to Hughes and Fry's request that the new aircraft be built in secrecy. The result was the revolutionary Constellation, and TWA purchased the first 40 of the new airliners off the production line. In 1956, Hughes placed an order for 63 Convair 880s for TWA at a cost of $400 million. Although Hughes was extremely wealthy at this time, outside creditors demanded that Hughes relinquish control of TWA in return for providing them money. In 1960, Hughes was ultimately forced out of TWA, although he owned 78% of the company and battled to regain control. Before Hughes' removal, the TWA jet financing issue precipitated the end of Hughes' relationship with Noah Dietrich. Dietrich claimed Hughes developed a plan by which Hughes Tool Company profits would be inflated to sell the company for a windfall that would pay the bills for the 880s. Dietrich agreed to go to Texas to implement the plan on the condition that Hughes agreed to a capital gains arrangement he had long promised Dietrich. When Hughes balked, Dietrich resigned immediately. Noah Dietrich quoted Hughes as replying, "I cannot exist without you." Dietrich stood firm and eventually had to sue to retrieve personal possessions from his office after Hughes ordered it locked. In 1966, a U.S. federal court forced Hughes to sell his TWA shares, because of concerns over conflict of interest between his ownership of both TWA and Hughes Aircraft. The sale of his TWA shares netted him a profit of $547 million. In 1970, Hughes went back into the airline business, buying San Francisco-based Air West and renaming it Hughes Air West. Air West had been formed in 1968 by the merger of Bonanza Airlines, Pacific Airlines, and West Coast Airlines, all of which operated in the western U.S. by the late 1970s. Hughes Air West operated an all-jet fleet of Boeing 727-200, Douglas DC-910, and McDonnell Douglas DC-930 jetliners, serving an extensive route network in the western U.S., with flights to Mexico and western Canada as well. By 1980, the airline's route system reached as far east as Houston and Milwaukee, with a total of 42 destinations being served. Hughes Air West was then acquired by and merged into Republic Airlines in late 1980. Republic was subsequently acquired by and merged into Northwest Airlines, which in turn was ultimately merged into Delta Airlines in 2008. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.